Good afternoon, everybody. It's Steve with Real Progressives. I took a mental health day away from the office just so I could breathe and get my feet under me. Lots been going on. As you know, I talk frequently about economics, but ironically, I'm not an economist, okay? I'm not somebody that cares about economics for the sake of talking about economics. What I want to do is I want to talk about why I am so adamant about talking about economics and what fuels my day and what matters to me and why this subject should matter to you as well. For many, many years, we have talked about politicians saying one thing and doing another. They have said whatever it took to get into our ear, tickled our ears with progressive lingo, made us feel excited about talking about progressive values, only to see them reject progressive policies and not deliver what has been asked. We have long since allowed them to tell us anything that they want to do. You just say whatever it is that they want to say. And if they're, a Democrat, the Democrats are going to support them come hell or high water. If they're a Green, the Greens will support them come hell or high water. There's no integrity in the way that these candidates operate. There's no integrity in what they describe as their ability to deliver. Now, for those of you who understand, you see a picture of myself and my son. And my son has autism. And it's very hard to talk about, but I talk about it as much as I can now. I'm trying to get used to it because I want to make sure that my platform allows me to do real good for my family as well, because they sacrifice much for me to be able to do this. But my son is not someone that can wait around for you to get it in your head that the United States government can afford to fund autism research, autism therapy, autism schools, you name it. Just taking this one subject alone, there's millions of other subjects that we could talk about. But the reality is that our nation can afford to fully fund not only the therapy, not only the research, but support systems for families as well. Providing them with whatever they need. It's there. It can be done. But because politicians lie so much, and because we accept it and allow them to, because, hey, the other guy's so much worse. My son gets an hour here of therapy, an hour there of therapy. Both of his parents have to work. So my son doesn't get nearly the level of help that he needs. This is real. This is right here, right now. Right now. And people make excuses for politicians to lie and say whatever they need to say to get elected. People act like MMT is some fantasy thing. It is a description. It doesn't need to be implemented. It doesn't need to have any kind of crazy changes. It's not a theory of something that we could do. It's a description of the way it is today. And my son needs help today. Today, he needs help. And we're supposed to be so gentle and sweet and caring and genteel. I understand you were taught economics incorrectly, but we really need you to wake up and do this, please. And I look at this and I say, you know what? My son doesn't have time for you to worry about your feels. Your feels come secondary to life-saving, life-changing, life-altering programs. And if you feel that it's acceptable for you to in any way, shape, or form impugn his ability to get treated by pretending like inflation's a real deal, by pretending like the private banksters and the Federal Reserve and all this stuff, all your little pet conspiracies come before his health. Imagine how much rage and anger is boiling up inside me in your direction, by the way. Imagine how much raw, pure, vile hatred is directed at the things standing in the way of getting my son treatment. Imagine how much rage is built up inside me because you prefer to worry about conspiracies than helping my son. Imagine the rage that I carry around the clock thinking about you blocking legislation because you don't understand that taxes literally do not fund spending, that our government is not constrained to taxes because it freely creates dollars, that his suffering, that his inability to get treatment is a direct result of you refusing to care about this. Because of you allowing politicians to say whatever they want, my son doesn't get the treatment he needs. And that's just one of millions with autism. The list of isms, the list of needs that we have is so incredibly great that when I hear people talk about there's no jobs out there, it makes me want to snap. And not just snap, but snap necks. Because there's so many jobs that need to be done that aren't done because we don't have the funding, because horrific people are saying the country is broke, that we can't afford this because of the private Federal Reserve and the banksters and all their bullshit conspiracies. My son doesn't get treatment because of the likes of you. Because when people try and tell you that we can afford this stuff, you're too busy telling everyone all you know about the private banksters and the freaking creature from Jekyll Isle and all your stupid shit. All your stupid, worthless drivel. My son suffers because of you. Because you also accept politicians that don't do any better. And you run around in little packs with your Vote Blue hats and your flags and your banners talking about what a great person is. Please fund this person's campaign. When that person doesn't understand how to finance big programs, and they're not thinking big because they're myopically dull-witted. Myopically dull-witted. So when you sit there and you wonder, why is that guy so angry? Why is he angry? What's got that Grumbine guy so angry? Oh, he seems so angry. Toxic white male, cis white male, whatever. Worthless. It's because I have a son with autism, amongst many other things. And this is just one personal example of why your unwillingness to change, why your unwillingness to fight for economic justice and learning proper economics so that we can have big, big, big changes. This is why. Now you know. And so when you give people a pass who lie to get elected, when you give people a pass and you run around, well, they're progressive. How How are they progressive? Tell me one thing that they can pass if they don't understand economics. One thing. You'll hear crickets till the cows come home. I'm not in this because I'm homies and buddies and want to pal around at the local DNC get together or the local burner meet and greet or the local whatever. There's real shit going on. And my life is pretty good compared to many. There are millions that are homeless. There are people that have no food, no shelter, no nothing. But you can't be bothered to learn economics so you can help them. You can't be bothered. Oh, I don't know about all that stuff. I just know this. I don't have time to figure out that the country isn't broke, can't be broke, creates its own money, and therefore we can afford these things. I can't be bothered to learn. I want to talk about the Rothschilds. I want to talk about nonsense. I don't want to save people's lives. I don't want to help kids with autism. I want to talk about the Rothschilds. You know, you got the facts right there in front of you. They're accessible. There's nothing to hide from. They're right there. Integrity. Use it. Learn the word. Have some. Don't you dare tell me you're a progressive if you don't know how to finance a New Deal. Don't you dare tell me you're a progressive unless you know how to finance a New Deal. I don't want to hear about you burning the system down. I don't want to hear about you ending capitalism and all this other shit. I want to hear about how you're saving lives today. We can morph, and we will morph to something. Nothing's static. Everything changes. The problem is we've been swinging right wing for so long. We've been swinging right wing for so long that the idea of doing something truly great is beyond the left's ability to even dream. Centrist Democrats are nothing but a big old freaking speed bump on the way to progress. The left is too busy worrying about trying to burn it down than trying to figure out how to get my son therapy. And not just 1 hour here, 1 hour there. Thank you for those, because we need those 1 hour here and 1 hour theirs. But what about real, serious changes? Changes to the inner city, changes to the way we do education, changes the way we get water into the cities, changes to constant improvement to the infrastructure of all of America. Why is it that we as lefties try to pretend like we're so progressive, but yet we can't figure out the most basic thing, how to pay for these big programs? Why did we allow people to still run around talking about raising taxes to pay for stuff? Why do we allow them to do that? Why are we not in their face, really grabbing the microphone like BLM did? Why are we not that kind of in your face about this? Because people aren't suffering enough, I guess. Maybe people aren't suffering enough to be able to be useful. Maybe they're too pinky out lattes, doing their whatever, and then acting like they're a progressive at the local meet and greet, hanging out, having drinks, happy hour. This stuff gets me to the point of explosion. I watched my son today at therapy. And when he's at home, he's just so lovey and wrapped up in it. And it's easy to forget sometimes how much work needs to go into making him be able to deal in society. And when we went to daycare, and I looked at him, and we went through the therapy, it was very obvious that he couldn't handle all the interactions. It was too much for him. And it requires an incredible amount of work for him to overcome that. And the only way that will happen is if we have funding that trickles down to the states from the feds. That's it, because the states will have to tax their way to this, and the states are all revenue constrained, and the states are all floundering. Only the federal government can do this. These kids need 7 day a week, all day long kind of interactions. And in a society where you've forced both parents to work, how else are you going to get it done? Shame on every one of you that is not constantly talking about economics. Shame on every one of you that is not demanding more of your congressmen or your senators and your local people. Every one of you. Shame on every one of you that does not focus on this. Because every program you think is important depends on this. Every single program depends on this. If you don't understand, and they don't understand, that the government can't go broke, that a government doesn't borrow from itself. We sell treasury bonds to defend interest rates, so that if an interest rate is going to stay at, they want to set it at 2% or whatever, that the interest rate stays the same. Otherwise, you'll have inflation. So what do? They sell treasury bonds so that they can go ahead and offset that. There is no debt. We don't borrow from ourselves. It's not how it works. We create units of account, dollars, freely at will when Congress writes a bill. The only way Congress writes a bill is if there's a mandate from the people or one of their bought and paid fors go ahead and say, do it, and then they'll do it. But the reason why we don't have great things is because we lack a willingness and an imagination to make it happen. Somebody said, no, I didn't go ahead and watch that video you sent me, and I didn't read that link. But it's on you, Steve, that you couldn't make it simple enough for me to understand. That's the level of personal responsibility the left feels for itself. It just wants to run to protests, get the nice hat, get the T-shirt that said I was at the march, be able to talk about it for years with their button on their shirt. Yeah, you remember that time I went to that march? Yeah, you were there too? Yeah, it was pretty badass, wasn't it? What'd you accomplish? What did you accomplish? Not a thing. Not a thing. You didn't accomplish a thing. And that right there has got to change if we ever want to see change. And I'm telling you right now, as much as I want change, and I will fight till I freaking fall off, die. I don't care. As much as we say we want change, I don't see it. I don't see it at all. I see horrible, wretched people trying to get everybody to dem enter. Come on, dem enter. Like that's a big deal. Like that. Like I couldn't vote Democrat as a Green. If I registered Green, why couldn't I vote Democrat if I wanted to? Of course I could. And if I was a Democrat, I could vote Green. Of course I can. There's no need to enter. It's not like you're doing anything other than giving air cover to make it look like your party matters. And your party doesn't matter. Your party is an obstruction. All parties are obstructions. None of them are fighting for people. They're all out there just gathering people. And then they don't even do the will of the people. They end up subjugating them and doing some other bullshit. I'm telling you right now, that little boy deserves better than the people in this country who get sidelined by nonsense. That little boy deserves a hell of a lot. He is completely defenseless. He is completely without a voice other than his father and mother. The movement would rather talk about bullshit. Rothschilds. Well, what about inflation? Do you have anything on inflation? What about death? I have a lot about death. I have an incredible amount of information on austerity-driven death. Why aren't you asking about that? Why do you keep asking about devaluing my dollar? Why aren't you talking about devaluing life? Why is that? Why is that? Why is it that progressives feel they can get away with talking about devaluing a dollar instead of devaluing life? I mean, that little boy has nobody. Politicians in my area, they're not saying anything. Why is that? Because they're still talking about tax and spend, just like every other moron out there that won't choose to learn, that sits there and acts like they got it going on, that doesn't have it going on. And then he suffers again and again and again. How many people out there have no voice? How many people out there just have to go with whatever we give them? How many? How many people out there are handicapped and are incapable of fighting for themselves and need an advocate? How many families with children with disabilities are left being their own advocates because there is no system fighting for them? How dare you defend a candidate that's not fighting for my son, for example? How dare you make an excuse for their ineptitude? How dare you give them air cover when they are not fighting for that little boy and your little boys and all the other little boys and girls out there that don't have an advocate? How dare you give air cover to a candidate, to a politician that hasn't put things in place for them because they're too wrapped up in tax and spend? How dare you defend them? How dare you give them air cover? And how dare you act angry that somebody else isn't giving them air cover because I'm fighting for that little boy, not your pet candidate? I don't care about your candidate. If they aren't fighting for him, I'm not giving them a pass. They're inept and they're incapable of leading anyone. Why is it that we can spend $700 billion on the military, but we can't spend $100 billion on kids with disabilities? $200 billion, $300, $1 trillion? Why is it that we act like we don't have jobs when I don't have a daycare that can actually give this little boy 7-day-a-week kind of care if they need it for autistic children? Why is it that if you say, oh, the job's dried up, robots coming, man, we don't need a job guarantee, we don't need this stuff, because, job, shut up. There's plenty of work not being funded today. There is plenty of work. Care work, social work, work that needs done by people, not by robots. Tons and tons and tons of it not being done. How dare you lie? How dare you lie and say that there aren't jobs, that robots are coming, when this little boy doesn't have 7-day-a-week therapy available because our nation can afford it? The one thing it may not have is enough trained professionals to pull it off. Well, guess what happens when you have a need? All of a sudden, there's an available job, isn't there? If we put the attention there. But we don't do that. Why? Because we want to ask Steve Grumbine about the Federal Reserve. You want to know about the intricacies of how money goes back and forth between the Fed and the Treasury. You want to know something about, well, what about the banksters and the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds? That's your answer to my son. Disgusting. Disgusting and utterly vapid and vacuous and worthless. How many people are laying there on park benches with newspapers over them? How many local areas are putting spikes on the benches to prevent these people from laying down on them? We've got real problems in this country, and you want to talk to me about the Rothschilds? How dare you? How dare you? How dare you? Oh, love will make us all better. You know what? You can be an asshole and understand economics and do better than a lot of the loving left that don't have a clue about economics, that would leave my son without therapy. The loving left that doesn't have a clue about economics drops the ball constantly because they're too busy worrying about how they're going to chase raising taxes. Shameful. An abomination. You want to see a left in this country that really cares about equality, really cares about the environment, really cares about making sure everyone has meaningful work and has benefits and healthcare and getting rid of student debt and green energy, you name it? Well, it's going to be an MM tier. No pledge you can give them. No pledge you can give a candidate is going to be worth a damn if you don't put it on integrity and how they're going to pay for it. I don't care how neat that pledge is wired. I don't care anything. If they don't know how to pay for the goddamn program, that little boy is suffering, and you then become my enemy. That's the deal. That's the deal. See, I can sit there and be all theoretical. I've got tons of theoretical things that we could talk about, right? I mean, we got tons and tons of it. So here is Kyle Kulinski. Kyle Kulinski decided that he was going to break out a little bit of ableist language there and talk to people. I know Stephanie Kelton. Stop thinking autistically, ignoring context. Okay. I'm infuriated. I mean, I could sit there and talk to you all day long. I could read to you from books. I could sit there and give you theory. I could get people on here that can do mathematic problems. It wouldn't matter. Morons will still say, well, what about the Rothschilds? What about the Rockefellers? What about George Soros? You think I'm pissed? If I wasn't on camera, you'd have no idea how pissed I'm telling you right now. It took me an hour to turn the waterworks off after watching my son in therapy today, because I realized how steep a hill he's got to climb. And I love him beyond words. And I know you guys love your kids too. And many of you have reached out to me that understand autism and understand the pain and suffering and the difficult, the trials and tribulations of trying to get a kid to get out of his head and just to engage you for just a moment. And the blessing of seeing them look you in the eye and say, Dada, for a minute. But instead, we've got to deal with parasites that want to talk about the Rothschilds and the private banksters. I can't make excuses for people like that. I think of them worse than Donald Trump. I see people talk about Donald Trump. I look at those people and I say, yeah, Trump's bad, but my God, you guys double down on dumb. You guys double down on the bad stuff, man. I'm not sure I can blame Trump for all this. I'm looking at you. One of these days, you're going to realize how important this subject is. And for those of you who already do, I'm very glad. We don't have enough of us, though. There's nowhere near enough of us. But for those who don't get this, I got to experience, as many did, the global financial crisis. I lost a family during that time. I lost touch with some of my children because they blame me for things. I lost touch of a job, a 17-year career. I lost an incredible amount of stuff. And then I had a huge amount of student debt sitting on me that I thought would be no problem, would be taken care of through my old company. And then it was left on top of me. And unfortunately, the kinds of work that is out there these days isn't like you don't just walk into a company anymore and say, hey, I want to learn from the ground up and work my way up to the top. It just doesn't work that way anymore. They want you to come in there with all the degrees and all the experience before you can even get in the door. And then if you start at the bottom, you got a log jam of people trying to leap up to the top. So that's your real story right there. Tons of student debt on a wing and a prayer, hoping you'll get to climb the ladder. And I'm telling you right now, the immorality of the usury that comes with student debt and the immorality that comes with people talking about the Rothschilds instead of how they can get people Medicare for all, or better, a national health service. I don't even want to talk Medicare for all. I want a national health service. Because we sit there and we choose to ignore this stuff, nothing is going to change. I'm telling you right now, nothing is going to change until we decide it's time to change. Nothing. Not one thing. I don't care if you get every progressive elected. If they don't understand how to pay for it, and they're not dreaming big, and they're not bonding together in their committees to come up with a new deal that attacks all these problems, not just one here. Oh, think about how worthlessly neoliberal it is to say, well, we'll give free college to people make less than 100,000. This is another neoliberal attack on humanity. All these means-tested things are a way of saying, fuck you to the people. I'm telling you repeatedly, get to citizens' benefits so that we don't have these fights anymore. So we don't have squabbles over, at what point do we cut it off, man? Because you know what? Rich people have kids with autism too, but they can afford a live-in therapist. The average person can't. And there's far more average people than independently wealthy people that can do that. It's time to just stop the games of dividing who gets what and just make them citizens' benefits so we can focus on what kind of society we want today. Do we want a society that serves the needs of people, or do we want a society that serves the needs of the oligarchs and the plutocracy and the freaking corporate lords that we serve? What kind of society do we want? I would love to see, quote unquote, socialism for our needs. And sure, man, I'll throw you capitalism for your wants. But for our needs, I'm tired of feeling like if I have a bad day, I could lose everything. And I wouldn't be able to take care of my son, or I wouldn't be able to pay my mortgage, or I wouldn't be able to pay my car payment and lose my car, etc. Aren't you sick of this? Haven't you gotten to the point where you're woke? Or are you still going to sleepwalk through this? We need candidates with integrity. We need activists with integrity and that demand integrity. And we need people that understand our nation is not broke, can't be broke. It creates its dollar out of thin air every time it needs something. It issues through Congress directions to the Fed to mark up accounts to the Treasury. That's it. Stop acting like that's some big deal. You don't even need to know. You'll never work at the Fed. All you need to know is that we can afford everything that we need. That's what you need to know. And that any suffering from that little boy right there, or for anybody else really, quite frankly, when it comes to basic needs, is a travesty that is a political decision to allow pain and suffering. It is a political decision to allow mediocrity in our life. Our life is considered whatever. And we contribute that. We contribute to that by being lackadaisical about forcing candidates to be of integrity and to know economics. And I'm done allowing that to happen. I really am. I'm super done. So with that, I'm going to check out. I've got a lot of work to do. I've got to get Real Progressives back on track. I've got to get us one voice, one message, one team. And I got to get us all singing to the same sheet of music. And I've got to get us to understand that failure is not an option. Because if we fail, there's nobody else. Look across the board at the other alternative media. Name one of them that consistently fights for a New Deal and for poverty and to bring about change. Not one of them. I'm telling you right now, people send me these links and I watch it and I say, what the hell did I just watch? I watched the current events like watching paparazzi. It's nothing. There's nothing there. I want actionable. I want to solve real problems, not entertain you. I hope it's entertaining because of the way we deliver, whatever, but that's secondary. What is most important to me is that you hear the message and you take action on it. You take action on it. Anyway, I'm Steve Grumbine. We're Real Progressives. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.